Everybody, it's Patrick at the Pitch Stack. You know me as a Kano main. We recently just got done with the PTI and the Battle Hardened at Pittsburgh because it's a local area for me to just go ahead and get some Flesh and Blood tournament experience in. And that's probably the best I've ever done when it comes to a Kano results. That particular weekend I was 9-4. If we don't count the two abysmal Dromai matchups, one during the Pittsburgh Battle Hardened and then one in the PTI, I was about 7-2, and I could have corrected the other two losses there. So I was able to scroll through some Twitter, and I came up with this little article here that I want to read, and I kind of want to give the first impressions as I go through, as I read it, and kind of give my thoughts on each little section here, because as a Kano main, you kind of have to tank a little bit more than your normal aggro matchup, I think. So let's just go ahead and break it down from the beginning. All right, let's go ahead and start from the top. Let's break a bit from standard intro, so I can tell you a story what happened to me last week at the Battle Hardened Pittsburgh. I was talking to Yanji Lee, a friend of mine and a featured caster of the weekend, about meta commentary on how to bring body language, overall demeanor, and those in the tank moments, quote unquote, in the commentary booth. In this conversation, he mentioned to me a sign of a great player that he was on the lookout for, and it's all to do with how the player goes in the tank and how they play after the fact. So, what is the tank? In the tank, or tanking, a term that is long to a pause in the midst of a round where you seem to assess the entirety of the game to inform your next hand of your decisions. In Flesh and Blood, the fresh draw of hands there, turn by turn leads to quite a few of these moments, especially as the game goes longer. Some of these best players are known for how long they take in these moments. Looking at you, Brody Spurlock. What Yanji brought to light to me is more impressive the exact timing of these moments can be. So let's build a scenario. You're Rhinar, you're playing him against Dromai, and you have a Sink Below in your hand, and then they lead it in turn with Ravenous Rabble. You have a general game plan here, just to leak as little damage as possible so you don't lose the avenue. Lose to the eventual burn them all. Okay. So you snap play the Sink Below because it blocks for 4 value and couldn't have popped the dragon anyways. It's pretty clear, a pretty linear play, and not necessarily long. The difference between what Yanji would be looking for is calling this play calculated or hasty. So typically, this is correct where it makes the most sense to block 4 for 4. However, it just probably depends on the board state. If you were to say you're Rhinar and you're wanting to block Sink Below with Ravenous Rabble, and if they have a Burn Them All, that maybe some dragons with on hits might be slightly better. But this example doesn't really show that this is what happened during a matchup, but maybe on the fact that if you need a hand fix because you're not going to be blocking anyway, so try to block a more definite on hit. Hyloria does block 4 for 4 with this, and you could probably prevent them from getting a card if you don't have any items on board at that point. Maybe a Snatch, and then they have Snappy still back. So it depends on the hand, but this does seem very straightforward and easier route to take. So let's continue. Ask the right questions. As soon as the first action is taken by your opponent, you need to assess the turn cycle. When Dromai plays a Ravenous Rabble, there are still 4 cards to be played. Ravenous Rabble is likely the least interactive of it all, and being just vanilla 4 damage. Exactly. So on hits isn't too crazy. So I agree with that. However, if you take a moment to go in the tank and build yourself a window to prepare for the entire turn cycle, rather to answer threats as they come, your first puzzle piece in front of you is as to how they play into your favor. So let's take the initial moment to spend a minute asking yourself some of these questions that we've already established in this article series. Ask, what is the game state? Check the Ash count. dragons on board, cards seen in that are critical for this turn, which is Command and Conquer, Snatch, and Dust Up. Because, of course, Snatch is there. Dust Up is an on-hit, transforming an Ash into an Ashwing for a 4-break. And Command and Conquer, you can't play, of course, a D-React in Command and Conquer. Ask how your hand gains the most value. Look for which your action point is the most guaranteed value. Hint, if it's Swing Big, then play Swing Big. Ask where you're going to get punished on blocks. Remind yourself what effects are likely in the Dromai deck, and how they force your hand with a Dominia or a Lost in Thought. It's not a question of asking yourself these questions on every decision point during the turn. It's something you should go in the tank for early on. This builds confidence about the turn cycle and helps you save time, since no two-step process about your hand plays on the defense versus offense. It's the same hand, this huge learning curve for new players. If you map out as early as you can and think about the turn on both sides, then playing Sink Below on a Ravenous Rabble starts to have multiple layers. So now they're going to go into the tank experience. After basically evaluating your turn straight away, you kind of have to evaluate as well the Ravenous Rabble before it goes onto the attacking layer. But if you let it go into the attacking layer and then let it go into either a 2 or a 4 or maybe a 3, I don't think in this example here that it's going to go to a 3, because they don't play yellows for Jamais. So let's go ahead and go through the tank experience here. So now Ravenous Rabble's coming at you, going to tank in your hand. You read your hand and you only want to play the Sink Below and hold a Pauper in case of dragons. And then they play a 2-card hand. Then you play a 2-card hand. You obviously don't want to just eat damage, but you're wary of Dromai refusing to swing dragons with a light board. Instead, they're likely to for a strong chain ender like Dust Up or Command and Conquer. You go deeper into the tank. If you Sink Below on Rabble, it's stronger into Command and Conquer follow-up, since you wasted less life this turn cycle. And if you don't block and you save the Sink Below for Dust Up and then you deny Ash and an Ashwing, it's huge value swing for Dromai. You go even deeper. If you don't block with Sink Below and assume that they're going to swing with dragons, you get to keep it in an arsenal where you have future flexibility to block for vanilla versus a Dust Up or a Snatch. You go way deep. Keep the hand in full send with Scab Skin Leathers line. No, please don't. Regardless of what you do, if Yanji sees somebody tanking on what seems to be a benign attack, you would call him the mark of a strong player. There should be near to no snap plays in Flesh and Blood, unless exact answers line up, like Oasis Respite on a Aether Wildfire. But the thing is, sometimes, let me go ahead and comment on this, because this is what Akaino gets run into a lot of the time. So if you are Dromai, you want to make sure to pay into, of course, pay into Oasis Respite for a Wildfire. However, when it comes to Aether Wildfire, a lot of the times we are killing as fast as fucking possible when it comes to Dromai. So that's fine. However, it may be a little bit rare. Like, say for instance, if you're doing Oasis, and this is just a generalization on Oasis Respite into Wildfire. So if you're pitch stacking where it can maybe suspect Oasis, then Aether Wildfire is going to get backed up by another Aether Wildfire, because generally slower decks give me more time to find the second one and make sure that it's right behind it so that I respond for the Wildfire so it's not completely negated. When it comes to the snap play of an aggressive Kano into an aggressive Dromai, then yeah, we just cry at that point for a Kano. But let's continue. But how do you know there's something's an answer? Because you asked a question in the first place. In this series of what to ask and how to answer, we'll continue to cover scenarios and questions that both push us to become better FAB players. This past weekend in Pittsburgh showed us what a post-Lexi Livewire world looks like, and wow, did it bring us some absolute grind games with camera. With longer games like Bravo, Showstopper Mirrors, and even more complex aggro decks like Dash.io, FAB is more of a mental load than ever. and yet somehow it's even more playable or even more enjoyable. With these articles, I'll be sure to keep you guessing less and asking more. So I actually really like this. I'm gonna give this an upvote. I really like this on how you have to evaluate certain turns. As a Kano main, you should be thinking on every single decision that goes into your game plan, even if it is a brain dead aggro match, like maybe Phi with 1 AB, which at that point really isn't much. I'd kind of be more scared about a Phi who's bringing 0 AB. But when it comes to somebody like Katsu's going to be bringing a lot of damage when it comes to on hits. So you just can't like accept all damage and just toss what you want to toss out at them. So it's not as easy as that. And if you go about it with a more open mind, then I think you might be a little bit better off with each tanking decision, especially maybe somebody like Boltyn. Boltyn usually comes with the Spell Void 2 on the helmet and then maybe AB1, or they may have a Radiant Clothing and no AB like I had this weekend. So when it comes to asking the right questions, you need to know what they're bringing at the beginning for a Kano think tank opportunities and play tempo and have the right game plan. So your game plan needs to fit in with your tanking thoughts as quickly, as efficiently as possible. Too long of a think can probably mess you up as well. Like if you're thinking too long, because then you're overthinking at that point for certain things that are a little bit too easy to just go ahead, take a second, evaluate the board state, and then go from there. So I actually like this as a new player guide of what to really think about and kind of like pass it on to people who are just starting the game. So I give this a thumbs up for Fabrek and for Yanchi to kind of get the gears turning in people's brains, I guess, so to speak, and kind of like make you think. If you are a mediocre player, maybe you can start thinking a little bit more in your turn by turn decisions. And yeah, that's my evaluation of this article. Thanks, guys.